Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Thursday, September the 6th, 2018, coming up on 7:45 Eastern Time. And hope everybody has had a great day. We got a little busy with some strong thunderstorms that moved through here between 5 and 7 o'clock, so that kind of threw off the live stream today. But we do have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about, of course, Hurricane Florence, the changes that have gone on today, what the weather models are telling us, or maybe not telling us, and where we are in all of this. Let me just start off right off the bat. Let's get rid of the disclaimers. I guess we'll do it right at the start. First off, just as a reminder, when it comes to hurricanes and tropical storms, you want to consult your local National Weather Service office or the National Hurricane Center regarding any decisions you may have to make with respect to a threat from a tropical storm or a hurricane for your area. Weather models and maps that we show you, my opinions are mine, but you really need to pay attention to the National Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov, and of course weather.gov. Also, for those of you who are interested, and a few of you have joined, appreciate it, I've set up a platform on Patreon, which will basically combine my website and the live streams together. And in fact, you'll get live streams on Patreon that are private, just for members. And you can find me there. There's a link on the descriptor to this video. So if you would like, and I'll put the link up on the chat board for those of you who are interested. And finally, we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon and affiliated sites. If you shop on Amazon and you use the link on the descriptor to this video, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back some coin out of their pocket, and everybody's happy. So there's the Patreon link for those of you who are interested. And in the meantime, let's get going with what's going on. Now, first off, and this is important, is the status of Florence, which we talked about yesterday, the fact that we were going to have some issues with respect to Florence and the shear conditions that it was going to run into, and indeed it has. Think back to yesterday when we still had a well-defined eye, and you look at it now, how stretched out. You notice how the clouds are basically stretched northeast, southwest. That is the impact of the shear blowing off the tops of the thunderstorms. And if you look closely, just before sunset arrives, and we switch over to the infrared, but the center actually looked like it got exposed for a brief time from underneath the main convection. This is why the Hurricane Center has lowered lowered the top winds now down to 80 miles an hour. It is a minimal hurricane. Now, we are seeing thunderstorms firing up again on the west side, it appears, and it could be a sign that the shear may have reached its peak and may start to relax. As long as the core of the hurricane remains essentially intact, I don't think you're going to see the system deteriorate too much. And in fact, if the core stays intact, that would certainly give you support for the argument that the system will likely strengthen back again to a major hurricane down the road in about 3 or 4 days. In the meantime, just want you to know it still hasn't quite crossed 50 degrees west. And there is an interesting statistic, at least since 1951, storms that have been in this position, there have been 8 of them, and none have hit the United States with a direct hit. All of them were out to sea adventures. But I would just caution that just because it didn't happen before doesn't mean there can't be a first time. And we're only talking about a data set going back to 1951. And we have seen some strange things happen over the last couple of years. So if you have an unusual upper air pattern, you could certainly make the argument that this time it might be different. But the other important thing regarding this shear is the fact that with the weaker center, One of the things my colleague Joe Rayo pointed out last night is that it looked like it was moving a little more north-northwest. And the Hurricane Center, in fact, did confirm that last night at 11 o'clock in their discussion because of the fact that the storm was very intense. It was very deep. In other words, it goes higher up in the atmosphere. Warm core systems are strongest at the bottom and weakest at the top, as opposed to a cold core system, which is reverse. Well, if you have an intense system, it tends to be strong, even though it is weaker as you go up. It is, at the same time, it's going to be relatively stronger on the way up. So when that happens, you wind up having the storm respond to steering winds in the higher layers of the atmosphere, which may not necessarily be the same as the winds in the lower levels of the atmosphere. That said, the shear here, the weaker storm, might allow this, or actually should allow this, to turn back more toward the west. Right now, the motion is 305 degrees. The Hurricane Center did note that it looked like there might have been a western jog of the center during this afternoon, so we'll see if that gets confirmed later on. It's moving very slowly, and that's one thing that's constant regardless here, is that this thing is just plodding along, and it's going to basically continue to move rather slowly. To the west of that, by the way, if you watch the cloud rotation that's back from north of the Leeward Islands all the way back to Florida, there's a huge upper low here, and this is large upper low is generating the unfavorable conditions at the moment. But that upper low is forecast to drop southward into the Caribbean, and that will relax the shear. Once the upper low it's on the same latitude right now as Tropical Storm Florence, but once it drops further south, and that will create conditions that would be favorable for strengthening, and that you'll wind up seeing the shear relax. So that's where it stands at the moment. The Hurricane Center's official forecast from the last advisory, notice that they do strengthen it back to a hurricane by Friday afternoon and turn it toward the west, and then basically put it on a west-northwest course from there. Our resident statistician, Anthony Orr, points out that the Hurricane Center will initiate flights into Florence beginning on Monday, which makes sense because it's on Monday that we're going to see the system cross 60 degrees west. For me, that is very important. In spite of the fact of what the models are doing, and they are all relatively consistent, most of the models are trying to bring this west of 70 degrees west and create a threat for the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic states, and southern areas of the Northeast for late next week. But I am not going to get concerned about this until it gets past 60 west. Every model that I looked at suggests that the trough that's out in the Atlantic is going to bypass this and miss it. And in fact, I'll show you here. This is for Sunday evening, and the trough in the North Atlantic. This is the cold front that's coming through the Northeast right now. The upper trough that's moving that along by Sunday evening is accessed from south of Greenland down to about the latitude of southern Virginia, that line that you see 588. And the upper air winds from there northward are blowing northwest across New England and southwest across the North Atlantic. So it is here that we have this weakness. And we've talked about this weakness, pretty much all week long. Upper high back in the Azores, and that ridge is weakly seen off the Atlantic seaboard here, but at this stage it's weak. But there's a bit of a thin but strong enough brick wall between that and the westerlies that are to the north. And I'm assuming that Florence would not get picked up. If that trough was stronger and further south, you would see this turn northwest, north, and northeastward. And also the fact that the system is weaker would argue against the recurving because of the fact that it would respond more to the low-level steering rather than the high-level steering. And the low-level steering would certainly argue that this system should push on more toward the west. So I'm waiting for that. Once we cross 60, and that is also the point, and this will happen probably sometime Monday morning, that is also the line where the Hurricane Center is going to, excuse me, begin to send aircraft in. Our forecast only goes out to 2 p.m. Tuesday, and at that point, it has the storm somewhere. They have it right along 30 degrees north and roughly at 67.5 west, so between 65 and 70 west and sitting right on 30 degrees north. I would say that if we wind up with further adjustments south, this is another thing I think we should look for, is if we develop a westerly component, a westerly motion that hangs around longer over time before it starts to bend back more west-northwest, if it's a little bit more westerly, I think the threat for the East Coast increases if Florence makes it to 30 north and 70 west, no further north than 30 north. When it gets to 70 west, if it's south of 30 north, I think that would strongly increase the probability of a hurricane threat. If it's north of 30 north, it might become a little more tenuous there because then it would be there mainly because the ridge in the Atlantic would not necessarily be as strong as modeled. Okay, so that's why I'm looking at those points. So 60 west, I'll start to get a little concerned. If it, after that, we will wait, and when it gets towards 70, if it's near 30 or just south of 30, at that point, I would be very concerned. And of course, then we would be at 2 p.m. Tuesday, and we probably would be hearing about possibly some initial, watches and that sort of thing. But I'm kind of throwing it way ahead of the game here because we're still at Thursday. So we've got a long way to go. If you're watching and you're along the East Coast, look, it's out there. Just pay attention to what's going on weather-wise. If it winds up recurving, great. That'll be terrific. If it doesn't, we'll deal with it here. And again, remember, Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov, or your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov. So let's take a look at what the hurricane tracking models today. Outside of one that recurves it east of 60, and then another model that starts to recurve it along about when it gets just west of 65, the rest of them all take it past 70. And notice, I can't see west of about 71.5 degrees west, 72, 71.5, 71 and 3/4. So of those remaining models, the easternmost one moves it over eastern Long Island, and I'm assuming that the other ones, if you extend it, would have landfalls or getting very close to the New Jersey shore or the Delaware coast, and the ones further south probably taking it closer to Virginia and North Carolina. Again, these maps are not to be used to make decisions, to seek local info. These are weather models. We're just kind of illustrating what we're doing. We're not pinpointing exactly, using this and saying, okay, this model, the blue model, is the one that we think is going to be the one that's furthest south is going to be more correct, or the orange, the AEMI model with a recurvature at 67. This just at least shows you what all these different models are doing, and you kind of try to get a sense of what's happening. I also I'm going to put up the ensembles. All of the maps, by the way, courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. Levi Cowan, actually, if you're really into tropical weather, take a look at his YouTube channel because he really knows his stuff, and I always learn something new when I watch him. So you can go to his YouTube channel. Tropicaltidbits.com is his website, and Tropical Tidbits, I believe, is also the name of his YouTube channel. Now, when we look at the GFS, the ensembles, which is you have the standard operational GFS, and then you have all these members. I believe there's 22 of them, and each one has is written slightly differently, so you get all these different tracks and reactions. Notice that except for two of the members, all the other members keep it offshore. A number of them make for very close calls, but I would caution you, as my guest Bill Goodman last night pointed out on one of our live streams, that the resolution of a lot of these members, in other words, the amount of data that goes in to a lot of the members, is far less than what the operational European model has. So oftentimes, for example, it doesn't handle upper highs very well, and even surface highs for that matter. And those are going to be critical here in this particular case. So I don't know that I have never really been a big fan of the ensembles because for the most part, it winds up being an average of everything else. And I don't know how much good that really does me. I think it's confusing. I'd rather, for me, I'd rather look at just the standard GFS and try to figure out whether it's too far to the east or too far to the west or all the other things that we have to figure out with respect to that model, rather than dancing around 22 different members because it's just insane. I mean, some of these ensembles have, an insane number of members, so I just don't know. To me, I don't find them particularly useful. I do look at them, but I don't find them very useful. Now, the issue regarding the strength going forward, of course, we do have this shear issue. And notice, after about 36 hours, a lot of the intensity model guidance does turn upward and strengthen this. And some of them strengthen it faster than others. We saw how quickly this became a Category 4 hurricane. So if it were to start to strengthen rapidly again, assuming all the upper air conditions are there, you could go back at least to a Category 3 status or Category 4. I've just discovered, by the way, I'm sorry, I left the map up. All right, so hang on. So there's your intensity model, and you can see how they all start to go up after 36 hours, and some, as I said, go faster than others. So most of them actually do have this going back to major status. Now here are those tracking models again. Most of them clustered around a track pretty far to the west. If you throw out the two easternmost outliers, you've got one that has it over eastern Long Island and another one, the other two, you can't really see where the shoreline is, but I assume it's probably close to the Jersey coast and then maybe the Delaware coast or down through North Carolina with the southernmost one. But you can't use this specifically. I think, again, the takeaway is that these are all, the vast majority of them are pointing to a westward component of motion hanging on for a long period of time. And, I just want to mention, too, if this does really become a threat issue, and I'm going to wait, as I said, until it gets past 60 west, so we'll be watching it calmly over the weekend. One of the things that would be concerning is the fact that it's coming in from the southeast. That is problematic, especially when it comes to coastal flooding and tidal issues. So we're going to want to pay closer attention to that as we go forward. So we saw what the ridge issue was, and it does bypass that trough. It misses it. And there's the GFS from this afternoon, building the upper high, cradling the hurricane around it, and then bringing it just about to the coast. And at that point, the ridge weakens and drops southward, and it's sort of left in kind of no man's land. The jet stream in Canada is still way to the north. We don't really see any kind of shortwave coming down to pick it up and kick it out. So the GFS did this ridiculous thing where it sort of dropped it down almost to the latitude of Florida before a major trough comes through late in the period and then kicks it on out toward the northeast. I'm not going to get involved in that at all, because I'm trying to kind of get it to. I want to know whether it's going to be at this point. The European today and also the Canadian models were pretty much, the European and the Canadian were very close. The European argues for a more westerly track because it has a stronger Atlantic ridge. Again, which model handles that better is going to be so key here. But it has a stronger Atlantic ridge, which has a further south track and brings it basically right on the North Carolina coast, drags it northward there along the Delaware coast, and then just sort of leaves it there just offshore for 48 hours. Again, that's a long-range problem. I want to see, I'm still trying to work out this part of the equation. Okay, is it here or is it further north? So the 18Z on the GFS, by the way, was further east. Same principles, further east. The GFS issue is the strength of the ridge, and I think we see that ebb and flow from run to run. It weakens it sooner and allows for this to kind of lift up a little bit further to the east, and then it just sits it out there. It does basically the same thing, except that it's got it, it just has it about 3 or 4 degrees to the right, which, look, that is certainly not out of the realm of possibility that we could wind up seeing it being further to the right if the ridge is weaker. We know what the players are. That is the bottom line. The players in this chess game have not changed since the beginning, and therefore we are, all we can do right now is watch the hurricane, watch the track as it evolves. Does it track more westerly and wind up a little further south than what's being modeled at the moment? Again, that would favor something getting very close to the East Coast, or does it gain more latitude, in which case you probably would see it curve a little bit further to the east. Same questions remain. It's one day later from yesterday, and we still can't answer them. And we're not going to be able to. That's why if you're putting specific questions up regarding, is it going to here, is it going there, I can't answer those questions. I really don't know. I don't think there's any forecaster that will tell you that, it's at this stage of the game that it's bound for a specific point. So I would just emphasize at this stage, we're still in this watch and wait mode. Monday morning, it gets west of 60. We'll see where it is. We'll evaluate it, and then we'll decide what level of concern we should have. It is going to, by the way, at least for the coastal waters, we have a new moon next week, so that's going to mean for some higher tides around the middle of next week. The new moon is on the 9th, and usually the peak tides come about 3 days or so afterward. So you're looking at around the 11th and 12th for the highest tides. So there will be issues. Now this cold front has moved on through, trying to settle to the south. High pressure goes by to the north. We're going to get some decent, cool, dry air with a fresh northeast wind. Low pressure there, you see it in southern Illinois. That actually is comprised of also the remnants of Tropical Storm Gordon. That low is going to wind up going up into western Ohio and eastern Michigan. The front that is going through now through the northeast and the northern mid-Atlantic, that is going to come back as a warm front. But it looks like the bulk of the rain and showers with that will be west of the coast, at least into Monday morning. Monday afternoon into Monday night, we'll get into that. And now, this is where you start to get the big upper high to build. So the front, the cold front that's with this, the low is weakening. The front is also weakening. We're going to transition over to a warmer, more humid air mass as we move into the middle part of next week. And there's going to be the onshore flow, so it's not going to be particularly hot, but it will be rather warm and humid. And of course, we're setting the table now on the surface map for the approach of Florence. And here's on the new GFS. Look at the difference here. This is Thursday morning, next Thursday. On the old run, look how much further to the left it is. So on the old run, it was at about 38.3 and about 73, okay? And on the new run at 18Z for the same time frame, it's out at 37, roughly 37.3 and about 70.8. So it's it's about a degree and a half further to the east. The errors here as we go forward, as we keep seeing these sort of shifts back and forth, are going to narrow. Okay, so you're going to see smaller errors, even though you might still see them go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. I would suspect that unless there's a radical change in the upper air, you're going to see errors getting smaller. And by the way, in comparison to the European, there's the European's surface. The European has it right west of Hatteras at this point, so it's basically at 35.3 and 76.1. whereas the GF and the Canadian, just for laughs, the Canadian has it just offshore North Carolina. It's a little slower, but eventually brings it in somewhere near Cape Fear, Wilmington, Cape Fear, that particular area, and then it actually leaves it there and starts to meander it around. All three models are suggesting that there's going to be a collapse of the steering currents eventually. So where it is at that time is going to be important. So if this, by the way, if this winds up moving faster, I would, for where it is now, if we start to see its motion accelerate a little bit, I think that favors a track closer to the coast, assuming that it gets by that trough. So, the variables are there, and in a lot of ways they're kind of overwhelming. You're trying to grasp all of them as we deal with all of this, but we'll just have to see what's happening as we go forward. We've got a nice crowd tonight. Welcome everybody. Appreciate you all being here. Please don't be shy. Post your comments on the chat board if you like, or if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to address them. David Schwartz, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it very, very much. New GFS run makes more sense with no trough to the west and it going around the periphery of the high. Yes, that was one of the things that the overnight models, David, did. That there's a lagging trough that the GFS kind of overdid, in my view, and that might be the reason why the overnight runs last night did what they did, which was to primarily keep things offshore. But the other models of the European seems to suggest that trough is not going to be a big factor. I really think, I agree with the concept that the ridge is going to be most important. All of my Long Island guys and gals that are on there, I know the thunderstorms. Patty Durkle, welcome back. Some big thunderstorms over Long Island for a change. It looked like the whole island from end to end was getting into them tonight, and that was a pretty rare thing, at least out east of out to the east of New York City. And William Uber, same thing. You got your thunderstorms. I know my buddy Leon of Lindenhurst. I'm sure he's happy because he's missed out on some thunderstorms. Hey, Shelly, man, those thunderstorms that they lined up across southern Connecticut on the radar, they really looked awesome. The radar presentation was very impressive. Some of those were intense, and I had a number of people reporting a lot of lightning. I saw numerous lightning strikes going on. Scott Brillard, thank you so much for joining on Patreon. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate the recommendation. I did not put him up to that. He did that voluntarily. Thomas Giovanello, I know, I'm sorry, I corrected that. My fault. One of the problems I have when I've got the model up in how I can display it through the program I'm using, I can't see you guys on the chat board. I'm going to have to get another screen so that I can do this. But I can't see you guys on the chat board, so I try to remember to make sure. I have to do some technical switches to get the maps back up, and I didn't. Okay, and that really what it comes down to. Jamil IKM, please come to Florida, please. Maybe someday. I do pay attention. Listen, if Florence were going toward Florida, or if it winds up, I don't think it will, but if it winds up going so far west that it were a threat to Florida, we'd be talking about that too. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Let's see. My wife, Chris Bethune, my wife is supposed to go to the Outer Banks with friends on 9/15. Okay, so that is, I haven't mentioned this to her yet. You know what? I wouldn't say anything wait till the weekend. At the very least, let's resolve where this is all going. Scott Olson, I've said it in the past. Well, you've said it in the past, referring to me. When it slows in the Pacific, look for the Atlantic to start up. The Pacific hasn't seemed to slow down. There are instances where that general rule does not work, and that usually is during the height of the hurricane season. When you're in the early part of the season, before you get into mid-August, it usually works. But there are times when it doesn't, and this is one of those times. But notice, by the way, that most of the storms that have formed pretty far out. They haven't really been forming off the coast of Mexico. So that could be the reason why the conditions are not that unfavorable in the Atlantic, and we more than likely will have another tropical storm on the map, at least one other tropical storm, and possibly two by the time we work through the weekend. Chris Alley, congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy it. The storm just went through, set off the neighbor's car alarm. I'm sure a lot of car alarms went off. Some of the lightning and thunder were spectacular on Long Island. Yes, a Green Fire 919. The track coming in from the southeast is rare, so it's of concern because of the impact to the coastal areas. You've got New Jersey and Long Island basically perpendicular to each other, so if you've got something coming in that direction, all the water gets squeezed into that one narrow zone. That's not a good thing. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just illustrating here, folks. I just want to make that clear. Yeah, you should. By the way, look, I understand, Brandon. I understand the weather excitement of it if you are a weather enthusiast, and I do get that. But you have to remember too that hurricanes are hurricanes are serious business. So and they're destructive, and they do take lives. And we have to remember that. So I would temper your enthusiasm just a bit. I understand from a weather standpoint what you're saying, but you got to temper it just a little bit. Hurricane Frederick, Chris Bethune. Yes, as I remember, I don't remember the name of the island that was in the Gulf of Mexico, other than Dolphin Island. I know was impacted severely by Frederick. I think it was that it wound up. There was an island out there that just completely disappeared because of that hurricane. That was back in 1979. There were the two pair maelstorms that year were David and Frederick. Those were the two majors that wreaked havoc, and they were the first majors in a while to come into the United States, as I remember. Killzone. Let's not. That's why I don't want. I want to make sure there's enough in the grocery stores. I got to do a little shopping for the weekend because I want to do some cooking. We'll try Carolina Gal to get those spaghetti models to turn out to sea. We will give it an effort. Abaddon Durakovic, the GFS is taking a very strong hurricane very close to New York and New Jersey. All three models have powerful hurricanes approaching, and I think that is. Whenever you've got them doing kind of the same thing, it's important, and it's something that you have to pay attention to. And the fact that they all seem to have well-developed systems is it lends the forecaster confidence that something is going to be there in that general vicinity. Again, as I said, we have to wait till it gets west of 60 first, and then the next thing is, does it make it to 30 north? Does it near or south of 30 degrees north when it gets to 70 west? And also, let me just remind you, everybody, at this point, once again, new moon next week, so there will be tidal impacts. Even if this stays offshore, there's likely to be tidal impacts. Dio Nankumar, Florence has shifts on models, but they usually recurve out to sea. Still don't know yet because of the trough and the weather systems going by. The ridge, I think, is the trough out in the Atlantic, yes. And then after that, the strength of the big ridge, I think, that's going to be front and center. Irene, we just passed the anniversary of Irene as that moved up right along the immediate coast. And that was a big deal for a lot of folks, particularly around the New York City area. Had been the first hurricane in many years to take a track like that, and it was it was then we got Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and Irene surprisingly is not a retired name. No, it isn't. It made landfall as a tropical storm when it got to New York City and moved ashore near Brooklyn. Why the rapid Lou Agaro? Why the rapid weakening and the major strengthening? The rapid weakening, I'll show you again. We can do that. The satellite loop will show it pretty well. hang on. But you have strong winds in the upper atmosphere. We've been talking about this moving into an environment of strong upper air winds, and as a result, you see how everything is stretched out northeast, southwest. Those are the strong upper level winds that are blowing. You see the cloud tops. You can actually just look at the cloud tops getting blown away to the northeast at the higher levels of the atmosphere. So it's important that the core of the hurricane remain intact. It looks like convection is trying to develop on the west side again. That might be a sign that the shear is starting to at least peaked and perhaps is beginning to very, very slowly ease. Models are forecasting that shift, that wind shear, those winds to ease considerably in the next 36 hours. Wind shear is kind of an odd thing, though. It's one of those things on the models that oftentimes it forecasts it and it doesn't always relax as quickly as indicated. So that is going to be very important, because once the shear relaxes, it will the weakening will stop and then it will start to strengthen again. Does that happen immediately? It might take another 36 hours or so. The Hurricane Center does seem to have it back to hurricane strength on their official forecast by later tomorrow, if I remember correctly. Yes, by 2 p.m. Friday. So we'll know at this time tomorrow if that's right or wrong. I got to give you got to give the Hurricane Center credit, because they've been, with respect to this storm, they've handled things very well in terms of the forecast and what's happened, except, and this is something that we've discussed, is the fact that the track part of the equation has gotten pretty good. The strengthening part of the equation still remains problematic. You get this surprise that it strengthens to a Category 4 hurricane, which the intensity models weren't actually showing that happening, but they did show the shear, and now they show the shear relaxing and strengthening again. Next advisory, DO, is at 11 o'clock tonight. We're going to be on 6-hour advisories until such time as any kind of tropical storm watch or hurricane watch goes up, and then it goes to 3 hours. But right now we're on 6 hours, and we're going to stay on 6 hours. And again, I bet we mentioned earlier, Air Force reconnaissance aircraft will be going into this beginning on Monday. Paranormal Florida. September 21st, 1938, the 38 hurricane, one to come up over Long Island. I'm sorry, no name, old times. No, this one, it come up over Long Island. You're talking about the 38 hurricane. When the 38 hurricane hit Long Island, it was a Category 3, but it was moving at 60 plus miles an hour, and that motion of 60 miles an hour, if you were east of the center, you wound up, that adds to the speed of the wind, the gusts. So there were probably gusts of every bit of 120 to 150 miles an hour, even if the sustained winds were much lower. And conversely, on the west side of it, if you were on the west side of it, the winds were probably cut in half. It was amazing to see where I was on Saturday. I was in Shirley, south of Fire Island, at a place called St. George's Manor, which was goes back to pre-Revolutionary War days, and George Washington had been there, and the revolutionists had used that as a fort, and there's an inlet there, and a breach that was on the west side of the 38 hurricane. Now, the 38 hurricane opened up what is now known as Shinnecock Inlet, which was east of where I was. I was just west of there, not very far to the east. But the area on the reverse side, the breach was closed by the 38 hurricane. Sandy opened the breach again, so water is now coming back in. And I was speaking to one of the folks there, and one of the interesting things that happens, that over the years, while the breach was closed, they would have problems with algae and brown tide, which happens here from time to time. But when the breach opened, it literally brought in, let's call it fresh water. And it actually created an environment where the water was constantly changing. So as a result, it cleaned it up. The water was cleaned considerably. The fish and wildlife in that area has prospered. So, some of these things that happen as a result of tropical storms and hurricanes in terms of how they impact the land, it's very interesting that you have the opening and closing of a breach on Fire Island to bring water in from off the Atlantic Ocean. Actually, on the one hand, if you were east of the center, you had coastal flooding and all the rest of it that you had to deal with, and the worst part of that hurricane. If you were on the west side, the upside was, the downside was that it closed a breach there. It closed an opening, and then Sandy came in and did what it did. But the opening of that new waterway actually helped clean the water out in Shinnecock Bay and in Shinnecock Inlet and in Moriches Bay. Very, very interesting how nature and science work hand in hand. Hurricanes are redistributors of heat. Remember that. When the heat of the sun heats up the earth in the summertime, the atmosphere has got a big headache. It's got to release that heat in order to get back to a nice, stable condition. And that's what hurricanes do. They redistribute heat from the hot areas down in the tropics to the colder areas up to the north toward the poles. Joyce Mack, when the dunes blew out here and Sandy flew in, it made the water so clean and the fish flourish again until they rebuilt the stupid dunes for the piping plovers. And that's what happens. I'm a firm believer, Joyce Mack, in the law of unintended consequences, and that's what happens. I did see where was that question? Sorry, let me just try to scroll back here. I want to welcome Fred DiNardo. Welcome. Will Hurricane Florence hit Northeast? I'm in the Philly area. There's no way for me to answer that specifically now. If there's going to be a threat to the eastern part of the U.S., it will come later Wednesday, the latter part of next week. But we're still not at the point where we can say that there is a definitive threat. We are just, at this point, we're just watching to see what happens. Let's see. Okay, I think that's pretty well it, because I'm coming up on 8:25 Eastern Time. I got to go. You know why? Because I got to go play on TV, and that starts for me at about 8:30. All right, so let me just promo a couple of things. We are going to do the Joe and Joe Weather Show. I hope you were on. You got a chance to watch last night. If not, go look in my video library. James CLP, thanks for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you. Check out the video library. We had National Weather Service meteorologist Bill Goodman from the Upton, New York office, which covers New York City, Long Island, and Northeast New Jersey, as well as the lower Hudson Valley and Southern Connecticut. And we talked all about this, and Bill knows his stuff. Bill and I have been friends for quite a while, and he lives near me. Actually, he's only about a mile or so away, we talk to each other all the time. And he's now discovered that he really likes doing these Skypes, so I may have him on again at some point over the weekend. But go take a look at that. And also, we had him on the Joe and Joe Weather Show from last night, which is on the video library as well. So give it a shot if you haven't seen it yet. I dare someone to send him a super chat to sing a song. Says Joseph Wilson Sr. Joseph Wilson Sr., you should check us out on the Joe and Joe Show on Facebook, because we actually sang one of the old songs from Hee Haw the other night together. So you'd be surprised what we do. And that's on Facebook tonight, by the way, at 9:15, roughly 9:15 Eastern Time on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or you can watch it also on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. Once again, for those of you who would be interested, I've set up, I'm on Patreon and on the Patreon app, so you can get not only all the website posts that I do on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, but you get them with no ads and no distractions. But we started doing videos to Patreon members only. Joyce Mack, thank you very much. A cup of for both of us. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. You can join us on Patreon. I put the link up on there. It's you can get it on app form and of course on their website, and you can get all my stuff and more in case you can't get enough of these weather live streams. Don't be really worried. Patricia Soto 2007. Puerto Rico. Do I think Puerto Rico will be hit by another hurricane again? Eventually, yes. It's not going to get hit by this one. So you don't have that to worry about, okay? Right now, there's nothing, we've got a couple of waves coming off the African coast, but there's nothing that suggests that we have something heading for Puerto Rico. At the moment, Lord Kate, the Joe and Joe show is roughly 9:15 Eastern time. Sometimes we do start a little bit late, depending on what other things he and I have to do. Will the hype, I only got time for one last question. Abedin, I'll take two. I see, Fred, you got your question. Would the high pressure have to set up in a perfect position for the hurricane to make a northeast landfall? It has to be strong. I mean, I guess it would have to be in a perfect spot if you're talking about a specific point. But the importance of the strength of that ridge can't be emphasized enough. Will it be like Harvey in terms of it stalling out? I don't look. That part of the equation, I don't quite have a handle on yet. We're not there yet. I don't want to even consider it until we've got it figured out where this is, how far west it's going to get. And we still don't have that part of the equation figured out. If it does what the models are showing, that's going to be hugely problematic for rains, obviously. But we don't know that that's the case. Okay, and I want to emphasize that. There's a lot, we're in a very uncertain place, and I know that's a hard thing. I don't like uncertainty personally at all. I don't like uncertainty in the least. And I know it must be frustrating when you ask a question and I can't give you a direct answer, and I respect that. But try and understand it. And remember that. Meteorology is a fluid science. I always say that when people say it's an inexact science, I think that's an incorrect way of looking at it. I think the way to look at it is it's a fluid science. You're forecasting change, and you're forecasting the change of the change. And that is an incredibly daunting task, okay? Because you have to anticipate virtually every molecule in the atmosphere and what it's going to do. So bear that in mind. And as far as Canada is concerned, Joseph Wilson Sr., we don't have a deep trough in the along the east coast right now. In other words, we don't have any kind of southerly flow setting up. So I would think that, at least from what I'm seeing right now, that for the time being, this is not going to do a recurve and go head up towards, say, Nova Scotia or Newfoundland, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment. All right, folks, got to go. Thank you very much. The Super Chat hitters, thank you again. David Schwartz, James CLP, and Joyce Mack. Again, more on Patreon. Link on the description of this video and inside this chat. Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight at 9:15. Live stream tomorrow back here on YouTube. I'm going to say 6 o'clock-ish. But that is always subject to change. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening.